I got so pissed off at a trashy power fantasy web novel that I had a freaking heart attack. And then I woke up as the story's 2-bit social climbing villain who shares my name, Ethan Cross. In the original plot, I'm supposed to exhaust myself chasing the rich, beautiful main female lead, only to get crushed under the heel of the story's golden boy protagonist and die a pathetic, meaningless death. But the character I felt even worse for was Sarah Jenkins, the so-called evil female rival who, driven mad by her unrequited love for the hero, ends up throwing acid, failing, and rotting in prison for the rest of her life. Screw the plot. I was a grinder in my last life, not an idiot. Let someone else chase the campus queen. I was turning around to save the one person who was struggling in the same mud as me, my fellow villain. But when the two of us decided to team up to just try and live a decent life, the righteous hero and heroine just couldn't leave us alone. They want to crush us for good. Fine. Then don't blame us nobodies for fighting back and dragging you so-called chosen ones down from your pedestals with us. The sterile, chemical smell of antiseptic flooded my nostrils. I snapped my eyes open, staring up at a painfully white ceiling. My head was splitting, and memories that weren't mine rushed into my brain like a flash flood. Ethan Cross, 20 years old, a junior in the finance program at Blackwood University. Grew up poor, straight-A student, ambitious as hell, and the designated scheming villain in a novel titled The Alpha's Billionaire Bride, a guy who would do anything to climb the social ladder and win over the female lead, Isabella Vance. My name is also Ethan Cross, but I was a burned-out programmer from the 21st century. Just a little while ago, I was decompressing from another all-nighter at work by reading that same cringy web novel. I got to the part where my namesake villain was repeatedly, publicly humiliated by the protagonist, Blake Harding, in the most cliched ways possible before being driven to jump off a building. My vision went black, and the next thing I knew, I was him. Fuck, I muttered, pushing myself up into a sitting position on the hospital bed. This novel was the pinnacle of literary garbage. The hero, Blake Harding, heir to some hidden, old-money dynasty, spent his time at college pretending to be a regular guy, just so he can enjoy slapping down anyone who looks at him wrong. The heroine, Isabella Vance, daughter of Blackwood's richest man, is gorgeous but has the IQ of a golden retriever. She's constantly surrounded by a swarm of admirers, and the original Ethan was the most pathetic and desperate one of the bunch. The worldview of this book was completely warped. If you were rich, your farts smelled like roses, but if you were poor, your very existence was an offense. A guy trying to move up in the world was a schemer. A girl trying to marry rich was a gold digger. The original Ethan had pulled out all the stops for Isabella. He worked 3 part-time jobs, pinching every penny just to buy her a designer bag that she'd toss in the trash without a second thought. He painstakingly researched everything she liked, only to have the love letters he wrote read aloud in front of the whole class, making him the campus laughingstock. He even pulled 3 all-nighters to help her with a business proposal for a class project. Blake Harding swooped in, took all the credit with a dismissive, "This garbage? I could write 10 of these in my sleep," and Isabella sneered at him, calling him plagiarist. In the end, Blake's plot armor made sure the original Ethan was ruined, expelled, and unemployable. With nowhere left to turn, he took a leap off a rooftop, ending his sad, pathetic life. And I was the guy who literally died of secondhand rage from reading it. "Ethan, you're awake?" A crisp voice, laced with undisguised annoyance, came from the doorway. I looked up to see a girl in a pink designer dress. She was beautiful, with flawless skin and big, expressive eyes, the kind of girl who had clearly been spoiled since birth. This was her, the heroine, Isabella Vance. Why was I in a hospital? Oh, right. The memories filled me in. Yesterday, the original Ethan had tried to give Isabella a surprise. He'd spent every last cent he had to rent a drone to fly a Bella, I love you banner outside her dorm. The drone malfunctioned, hit a power line, and the feedback from the controller electrocuted him just enough to make him pass out and tumble down a flight of stairs. "Now that you're awake, get discharged. Stop playing dead. I paid your medical bills, but you'd better pay me back." Isabella stood with her arms crossed, looking down at me with a gaze dripping in disgust and contempt. "Ethan, I'm begging you, can you please stop doing these pointless things?" Do you really think you're worthy? That knockoff bag you gave me? I threw out. Those letters? I burned them. We're not from the same world. Do you understand? When a toad tries to eat a swan, it's just disgusting. Her words were like poison-tipped daggers, aimed straight at the original Ethan's fragile heart. If it were him lying here, he'd probably be shattered. But it wasn't him. I felt nothing. In fact, I almost wanted to laugh. I looked at her face, so full of smug superiority, and slowly curled my lip into a smirk. Are you done? My voice was calm, so calm it actually made her pause. In her memory, whenever she berated him like this, Ethan would act like a kicked puppy, either groveling for forgiveness or just standing there, red-faced and speechless. If you're done, then get out. I threw back the covers and started getting dressed. The medical bills, I'll pay you back as soon as I can. And another thing, from now on, stay out of my business. Your world is too high and mighty for me. This toad has lost his appetite. My reaction was completely outside her expectations. Her eyes went wide, and she stared at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. Ethan, what's this attitude? Do you think playing hard to get is going to make me look at you differently? Let me tell you, that's impossible. She shrieked, her voice rising in fury. I couldn't be bothered to reply. I finished dressing and walked toward the door. As I passed her, I paused, turned my head, and gave her a look you'd give a particularly slow child. Confidence is a good thing, Miss Vance. But this much confidence, that's just being delusional. Without waiting for a response, I walked out, leaving her fuming and stomping her foot in the empty room. Stepping out of the hospital, I breathed in the fresh, exhaust-tinged air and felt like I was finally alive again. I checked my pockets. A few crumpled dollar bills and a student ID card. That was everything the original Ethan owned. Pathetic, but it didn't matter. Now that I was here, I wasn't going to let his life be a tragedy. As I walked, I sorted through the plot in my head. In this twisted world, almost everyone besides the main couple was a victim. And the one who pissed me off the most, besides my own character, was someone else. The female villain, Sarah Jenkins. She was a grinder just like me, a nobody. She came from a typical working-class family, pretty in a quiet way, with a stubborn streak. And she was obsessed with Blake Harding, so in love that she lost herself completely, to the point of madness. Just like the original Ethan, she used every clumsy, desperate method to get his attention, only to be met with humiliation and contempt. Blake felt that a scheming gold digger like Sarah wasn't even fit to tie his shoes. At the end of the novel, during Blake and Isabella's wedding, Sarah makes her final, desperate move. She shows up with a bottle of sulfuric acid and tries to throw it on Isabella, the woman who stole everything from her. The result was predictable. Blake kicks her away, the bottle shatters, and the acid splashes all over her own face, disfiguring her. She ends up in prison for attempted assault, living out the rest of her miserable life in pain and regret. When I read that part, I thought it was ridiculous. The author had turned two desperate, struggling kids from the bottom rungs of society into psychopathic monsters just to make the hero and heroine look good. Why? Why did we, the nobodies, have to be the stepping stones and sacrifices for your perfect love story? An idea began to form in my mind, growing with a wild intensity. If I was the scheming male villain, and she was the vicious female villain, why couldn't the two of us just get together? We were the same. Both of us were stuck in the mud, desperate for a little bit of sunshine. Instead of chasing after a sun that was too far away and would only burn us, why not just hold on to the person next to us who also needed a little warmth? Yes, that was it. The billionaire's daughter? She looks better on a magazine cover. Starting today, my new target is the female villain who has it even worse than me. I'm going to save her, and in doing so, save myself. I clench my fists, a fire I'd never felt before lighting up in my eyes. Blake Harding, Isabella Vance, I'm not playing a part in your love story anymore. I'm taking my fellow villain and starting a new chapter of our own. You two can have this idiotic world all to yourselves. Once I made my decision, the first step was to find Sarah Jenkins. According to my memory of the book, at this point in the timeline, Sarah was at the peak of her obsession with Blake. She was like a stalker fan, a ghost who would appear in the corners wherever he went, watching him with a heartbreaking mix of love, pain, and inadequacy. Blake was the captain of the university basketball team, and this afternoon, there was a big inter-campus game. There was no doubt she'd be there. I checked the time. An hour and a half until the game. I headed back to my dorm first. The original Ethan's dorm was a quad, and it was a dump. The air was a foul mix of stale sweat and instant ramen. My three roommates were in the middle of a loud, profanity-laced online gaming session, their keyboards clattering like machine guns. When they saw me walk in, one of them, a heavy-set guy named Leo, pulled off his headset. Well, look who's back. Our resident Romeo, he said in a slimy, mocking tone. How'd the drone proposal go? Did the lovely Isabella fall weeping into your arms? The other two guys snickered. In the dorm, the original Ethan was a total outcast. He was always alone, completely focused on studying, working, and chasing his goddess, which made him a world apart from his game-obsessed roommates. I ignored them and walked over to my desk. It was piled high with textbooks and notes, a stark contrast to the chaos around it. I found my meal card, a little over $10 left on it. Then I dug a relatively clean, white button-down shirt out of my closet and changed. The mirror reflected a handsome but pale face. The kid's features were sharp, but his eyes held a permanent shadow of gloom and resentment. You could tell from how thin he was that he'd been living on a diet of malnutrition and exhaustion. From now on, I'll make sure you live like a real person, I whispered to my reflection. I didn't linger. I grabbed my meal card and headed straight for the campus convenience store. I used the last of the money on my card to buy 2 bottles of Arizona iced tea. Then, I went to the outdoor basketball court. The afternoon sun was bright. The bleachers were already starting to fill up, mostly with girls there to watch Blake. I spotted him immediately. Dressed in a bright red jersey, Blake was tall, handsome, and radiated an effortless confidence. He was joking with his teammates, every gesture screaming top of the food chain. And Isabella, like a queen holding court, was sitting in the best section, surrounded by her chattering circle of friends. She waved at Blake, and the two shared a look of easy intimacy that made the girls around them squeal. What a picture-perfect couple. My eyes didn't linger on them for more than a second. I started scanning the far corners of the bleachers, searching for that familiar, yet unfamiliar, figure. Soon I found her. In the highest, most remote corner of the stands, a girl in faded jeans and a plain gray t-shirt was sitting alone, hugging her knees. That was Sarah Jenkins. She wasn't screaming or cheering like the other girls. She was just quietly watching the shining star at the center of the court. She was clutching a bottle of water so tightly that the veins on the back of her hand stood out. Her expression was a complex storm of adoration, longing, shame, and a deep, cutting pain. The sun didn't reach her corner, making her look like she'd been forgotten by the entire world. Seeing her like that, my heart gave an unexpected pang of sympathy. This was my compatriot, a fellow lost soul, hopelessly chasing a light that didn't belong to her. I took a deep breath and started walking toward her, the 2 iced teas in my hand. My approach seemed to startle her. Sarah looked up, her eyes immediately wary. When she recognized my face, a flicker of confusion and disgust crossed her features. She knew me, or rather, she knew the original Ethan. In the novel, Ethan Cross and Sarah Jenkins, the 2 official villains, never interacted. In fact, they despised each other. Ethan saw Sarah as a shameless lunatic who embarrassed all poor people. Sarah saw Ethan as a spineless coward who would sell his soul for money, making him even more pathetic than her. What do you want? Sarah's voice was cold, guarded, pushing me away before I even spoke. I didn't say anything. I just sat down in the empty space next to her and held out one of the iced teas. Sarah froze, not taking it. She stared at me with a suspicious, hostile gaze that screamed, "What kind of sick game are you playing now?" I just smiled, twisted the cap off my own bottle, and took a drink. "It's hot out. Your lips are chapped," I said, my voice gentle, with no hidden agenda. "Just offering you a drink. That's all." My straightforwardness seemed to catch her off guard. She hesitated but still didn't take it. "I'm not thirsty," she said, turning her head back toward the court. I didn't push it. I just placed the bottle on the concrete step next to her. The game started. Blake was a monster on the court, and every basket he made was met with a tsunami of shrieks from the stands. Sarah remained the same, just watching quietly. Every time Blake scored, a brief light would flash in her eyes before being swallowed by an even deeper disappointment. At halftime, Blake strode off the court, surrounded by his adoring teammates. Isabella immediately fluttered over like a butterfly, holding a towel and a bottle of water. "Blake, you were amazing," she said, looking up at him with pure worship in her eyes. Blake took the water without even looking at her, his gaze sweeping across the stands like a king surveying his domain, basking in the attention. Just then, Sarah, clutching the water bottle she'd been holding for half an hour, finally mustered her courage and stood up. She wanted to walk over and give the water to Blake. She only made it 2 steps before she was blocked by one of Isabella's friends. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" a girl with heavy makeup sneered. "Can't you see Blake and Bella are talking? Don't be an eyesore." I just wanted to give him some water," Sarah stammered, her voice trembling. "Water? Who do you think you are?" another girl scoffed. "Does Blake look like he needs your cheap water? You should really look in a mirror before you try punching so far above your weight." Their voices weren't loud, but they were loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. A wave of cruel, mocking laughter rippled through the section. The color drained from Sarah's face. She stood frozen, exposed, and humiliated like a clown stripped naked in the center ring. Blake just shot her a cold glance, the kind you'd give a disgusting bug. Then he wrapped his arm around Isabella's shoulders and turned away, as if looking at Sarah for another second might contaminate him. Sarah's body was trembling. The water bottle in her hand slipped from her grasp and clattered to the ground. She slowly bent down to pick it up, but her hand was shaking so badly she couldn't get a grip on it. Just then, a clean, steady hand reached down and picked it up for her. Sarah looked up, startled, and saw me. I didn't look at her. I walked over to the nearest trash can and tossed the bottle inside. Then I came back, took the still cold bottle of iced tea, and pressed it into her hand. Wasting a single tear on someone who isn't worth it is a tragedy. I looked her straight in the eye and spoke, my voice clear and firm. "And that water? It's tainted now." My words hit her like a lightning strike. Sarah stared at me blankly. The cold bottle in her palm sent a chill through her skin, bringing a sliver of clarity to her chaotic mind. The look in her eyes was no longer just disgust and suspicion. It was mixed with shock and confusion. Sarah didn't get it. She didn't understand why I was helping her. In her eyes, Ethan Cross was a campus joke, just like her. One chased money, the other chased love, both using the same pathetic methods to pursue people who were out of their league. They were supposed to be rivals in misery, despising each other. What? What do you really want?" Sarah finally managed to ask, her voice hoarse and laced with tears. "I told you I just wanted to buy you a drink," I said, sitting back down next to her, keeping a respectful distance. "And to give you a piece of advice." "Advice about what?" "Stop doing stupid stuff like this." I looked out at the court, where the game had resumed, but my eyes weren't focused. "Do you really think if you kneel before them and offer up your heart, they'll give you a second look? No, they'll just see you as an annoyance, kick you out of the way, spit on you, and call you pathetic." My words were brutal and direct, a knife slicing open the bloody reality she refused to face. Sarah's body shook even more violently. She bit her lip so hard I was afraid she'd draw blood, fighting to keep her tears from falling. "What gives you the right to say that to me? You're just the same," she finally choked out, her voice breaking. "The things you do for Isabella Vance. Are you any better than me? Who are you to lecture me?" "You're right." I didn't deny it. I admitted it freely. The old Ethan was just as much of an idiot as you are. We were like 2 moths flying into a flame. We knew it was a bottomless pit, but we still threw ourselves at it, hoping for a little warmth, only to get burned to a crisp. I turned and looked at her stubborn, fragile face. "But today I woke up," I said, my voice soft but filled with an undeniable strength. "I don't want to be a moth anymore. What about you? Do you want to keep being that pathetic moth that everyone laughs at?" Sarah's head snapped up, and the tears finally broke free, streaming down her cheeks. "Then what am I supposed to do?" she sobbed like a lost child. I just like him. I can't control it." "Like?" I scoffed. "Are you sure you actually like Blake Harding, the person?" My question made her freeze. "You're in love with a fantasy, an image you built in your own head," I said, mercilessly shattering her delusion. "You like that he's handsome, that he's popular, that he has this golden aura around him. Because those are all the things you don't have, the things you crave. You think that by having him, you can escape your own mediocre, invisible life and make everyone envy you. That's not love. That's idol worship. It's a fantasy born from insecurity. My words were like hammer blows, striking her heart again and again. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out, because she knew, deep down, that I was right. She had never really known Blake. She didn't know what he liked, what he hated. She was just a worshiper, bowing before a golden statue she had built herself. "Look at us, Sarah." I pointed at her, then at myself, my tone growing heavier. "What are we? We're the people who have to budget every meal down to the last dollar. We're the people who wear faded clothes and feel ashamed just walking past the kids in designer gear. We're the people who pull all-nighters for a week straight just to have a shot at scholarship. We are the nobodies, the grinders at the bottom of this money-worshipping world. And them? They're the golden children. One of their dinners costs more than we spend on food in a month. A shirt they toss out is something we have to work for weeks to afford. They have never known what it feels like to fight with everything you have just to stay afloat. Sarah, we aren't even the same species as them. Do you get that?" By now, Sarah was sobbing uncontrollably. Every word I said was a reflection of her own life. To be seen so clearly, to be understood so completely, it shattered all her defenses. She had never spoken about this to anyone. Her insecurities, her pain, her resentment. She kept it all locked away. And today, someone had laid it all bare. And that someone was the person she used to despise the most, Ethan Cross. "We're the ones who are the same, Sarah," I said, my voice softening. "Only we can understand each other's pain." I pulled a small pack of tissues from my pocket and handed her one. She hesitated for a moment before taking it, messily wiping at her tears. "Stop crying," I said gently. "He's not worth it." She didn't speak, just hugged her knees and buried her face in her arms, her shoulders shaking. I didn't say anything more. I just sat beside her in silence. The sun began to set, stretching our shadows long across the bleachers until they finally met and merged into one. The game ended. Blake's team won by a landslide. The crowd slowly dispersed. Isabella, the proud princess, linked arms with her hero, and they left amidst a sea of envious glances. They never once looked toward our corner. It was as if we were invisible. When we were the last two people in the stands, Sarah finally lifted her head. Her eyes were red and swollen, but they were clearer than before. "Thank you," she said, looking at me. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't mention it." I smiled and stood up. "Come on, I'll buy you dinner." "Huh?" She looked startled. "What, huh? I've still got about $10 on my meal card." "It's enough for a bowl of chili at the dining hall," I said, trying to sound casual. "Think of it as the first official meeting between fellow villains." Sarah looked at me, her expression complicated. After a moment of silence, she slowly stood up and nodded. "Okay." As the sun set, we walked one behind the other down the tree-lined path to the dining hall. I knew this was just the beginning. Pulling her out of that abyss for good was going to be a long road. But that was fine. I had plenty of patience. The university's second dining hall was always the loudest, most chaotic place on campus. The smell of cheap food mixed with the roar of hundreds of voices, creating a symphony unique to broke college students. Sarah and I each got a $3 bowl of chili and found a table in a corner by the window. The meat in the chili was practically non-existent, but for grinders like us, this was a feast. Sarah kept her head down, eating in silence. The events of the afternoon had clearly shaken her to the core. Her already pale face looked even more drawn. "Eat up," I said, taking the cookie that came with my meal and sliding it on her tray. She looked up sharply, surprised. You look like a strong wind could blow you away," I smiled, digging into my chili. "Don't worry, I work 3 jobs. I need the protein more than the sugar." My gesture left her at a loss for words. She stared at the cookie on her tray, her lips parted as if to say something, but in the end, she just lowered her head again, her eyes growing a little misty. For someone who had spent so long being ignored and ridiculed, even this tiny, insignificant act of kindness was enough to crack the ice around her heart. We finished eating quickly. I'll take the trays," Sarah said, standing up to clear the table. "Wait," I said, stopping her. She turned, looking at me with confusion. "Sarah," I said, my expression serious, "how much money do you have right now?" The question was blunt, almost rude. A blush crept up her neck. She nervously clutched the hem of her shirt. My allowance for the month hasn't come in yet." So, you're broke? I nodded, understanding. This was what I expected. According to the novel, her family's financial situation wasn't much better than the original Ethan's. Her budget was always tight, and she often spent what little she had on pointless gifts for Blake. This can't continue, I said, standing up and facing her. You have to be able to feed yourself before you can even think about things like love or dreams. What are you getting at? She asked, a flicker of her old suspicion returning. I'm saying we need to make money, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. On the scraps our parents give us, we can barely survive, let alone fight back against people like Blake and Isabella. Fight back? Sarah gave a bitter laugh. What are we supposed to fight them with? With this, I said, tapping my temple. They have money and connections, but we have something they don't. What's that? The survivor's instinct of a nobody, I said, a confident smile spreading across my face. The relentless, do whatever it takes grit that comes from having to fight for your own existence. When I said do whatever it takes, I didn't mean stealing or cheating. I meant the endless ingenuity and resilience that people at the bottom develop just to get by. Come with me, I said, not explaining further. I took her hand and led her out of the dining hall. Where are we going? She asked, stumbling to keep up. Where we need to go to make some money. I took her to the campus student employment center. The office was basically a bulletin board covered in flyers for part-time jobs. Tutor $15/hour. Handout flyers $80/day. Diner waitress $1,200 per month, meals included. Sarah looked at the listings, and her eyes dimmed. She'd done all these jobs before. They were exhausting, paid pennies, and the money never solved anything. This is pointless, she said quietly. I know. I nodded, my gaze skipping over the menial labor ads and landing on a bright red poster at the very top of the board, one that most students ignored. The Innovators Challenge, National University Entrepreneurship Competition. Campus qualifiers are now open. First prize, $30,000. $30,000. To us, that was a fortune. That, Sarah saw it too, but she immediately shook her head. That's impossible. Competitions like that are for the geniuses and the legacy kids. We wouldn't stand a chance. Why not? I turned to face her. You're a communications major. You're a great writer with a logical mind. I'm a finance major. I know markets, I can run the numbers. The two of us together, why can't we give a shot? But we don't even have a project idea. Sarah still wasn't convinced. Who says we don't? I gave her a mysterious smile, pulled out my phone, and opened an app, holding it out for her to see. The interface was simple, with a clean design. The name on the screen was Campus Connect. What is this? It's a program I wrote myself, pulled a few all-nighters to get it working. I explained. The function is simple. It's a peer-to-peer service platform for students on campus. For example, student that doesn't want to go to class, so they post a lecture sitter task on the app for $20. Student B has a free period, accepts the task, sits through the lecture, and earns the $20. Or maybe student C is too lazy to go get their food delivery, so they post a delivery grab task for $5. This platform can solve all kinds of lazy student problems. Picking up packages, printing papers, saving seats in the library, even ghostwriting homework. I whispered the last part. Sarah's eyes lit up. She immediately understood the potential. The demand for these kinds of gray area services on a college campus was enormous. If we could actually get this platform off the ground, it would be a gold mine. This idea is brilliant, she said, her voice filled with excitement. But how would we market it? How would we run it? That's why we enter the competition, I said, putting my phone away, my voice full of confidence. We need a stage to present our project. More importantly, we need that prize money as our startup capital. Our entire business plan will be built around this Campus Connect app. I looked at her, my eyes shining. Sarah, you'll be in charge of writing the proposal and the market research. I'll handle refining the app's features and building the financial model. Together, we're going to win that $30,000. My confidence was contagious. Sarah looked at me, and for the first time, her eyes weren't filled with confusion or shame. Instead, a new flame was lit, a flame called hope. She had never imagined that she could be part of a prestigious entrepreneurship competition. She had never imagined that her talents could be used for something like this. Can I really do it? she asked, a hint of her old insecurity creeping back. You can, I said, squeezing her shoulder reassuringly. Trust me, and trust yourself. When us nobodies get serious, even we should be scared of what we can do. Looking into my determined eyes, Sarah finally gave a firm nod. Okay, I'm in. In that moment, I saw the girl who had lived her life in the shadows finally find her own light. For the next week, Sarah and I basically lived in a corner of the library. We poured every spare minute we had into the project. I used the library's public computers to constantly refine the back-end code and front-end design for Campus Connect. Meanwhile, Sarah unleashed her incredible talent for research and writing. She devoured market data, analyzed different campus business models, and even designed and distributed hundreds of surveys to gather real user feedback. She lost weight, and the dark circles under her eyes made her look like a raccoon, but her gaze was brighter than ever. For the first time, she was fighting for a goal that was truly her own. The feeling was so intoxicating that she forgot about being tired. And for a little while, she even forgot about the man who had caused her so much pain. A week later, a 50-page business plan, detailed, logical, and thoroughly researched, was finally complete. On the cover page were the project title, Campus Connect, building a hyperlocal campus support ecosystem, and our names. Ethan Cross, Sarah Jenkins. Staring at the printed document that held so much of our sweat and hope, Sarah's eyes glistened with tears. We actually did it, she murmured. This is just the first step, I smiled, binding the copies. Come on, let's go register. The registration process was simple. We handed our business plan to the competition's organizing committee, which was run by the student government. The guy who took our submission was a quiet, glasses-wearing student. Okay, got it. You can go wait for the notification, he said without even looking up. We never imagined that trouble would find us so quickly. 2 days later, we got a call from the committee. Our project, we were told, had been disqualified for plagiarism. Plagiarism? The word hit me like a punch to the gut. That's impossible, Sarah yelled into the phone. We wrote every single word of that proposal. We crunched every number ourselves. How could it be plagiarism? That's the committee's decision. If you have a problem, you can come see for yourself at the student government office, the person on the other end said impatiently, then hung up. Sarah and I sprinted to the student government office. Several people were inside. Seated at the head, like a king on a plastic throne, was the student body president, Chad Miller. He was one of Isabella Vance's most loyal lapdogs. And sitting beside him were none other than Isabella and Blake Harding. The moment I saw them, I understood everything. This wasn't about plagiarism. This was a setup. Chad, I'd like to know why you're accusing us of plagiarism, I said, my voice cold as I fought to keep my anger in check. Chad pushed his glasses up his nose and tossed 2 bound proposals onto the table in front of us. See for yourself. I picked them up. One was ours. The other one had the exact same project name, Campus Connect. The core idea, the market analysis, even some of the phrasing, it was a near-perfect copy of our work. The only difference was the names on the cover. This new proposal listed Blake, Harding, and Isabella Vance. How is this possible? The color drained from Sarah's face. They stole our proposal. You should be careful about what you say, Isabella said with a smug smirk, crossing her arms. Blake and I came up with this idea a long time ago. You two, on the other hand, must have overheard us somewhere and tried to steal our work. You really are delusional. Exactly, Blake added, his voice dripping with contempt. With your brains? You think you could come up with an idea this innovative? Don't make me laugh. Just admit you cheated and get lost. Don't embarrass yourselves further. Their shamelessness was so profound, it was almost impressive. I turned my gaze to Chad. Mr. President, as far as I know, we submitted our proposal 3 days ago. Theirs was submitted yesterday. Based on the timeline, isn't it obvious who plagiarized whom? Chad's expression faltered for a second, but he quickly recovered. Submission time doesn't prove originality. Blake and Isabella had already discussed their idea with me in detail. You two are the ones acting suspiciously. Discussed it? Is there any proof of that? I pressed. I'm the proof. Chad, flustered by my questioning, slammed his hand on the table. Ethan, stop making trouble. I say you plagiarized, so you plagiarized. Now get out before I call security. Looking at their corrupt, self-serving faces, Sarah was trembling with rage, tears welling in her eyes. A week of her tireless work, stolen and trampled on without a second thought. She was about to lunge at them, but I grabbed her arm and pulled her back. I shook my head at her, then turned to face Blake and Isabella, a strange smile spreading across my face. Okay, fine, Enojid. Since you say the project is yours, I trust you'll do a great job with it. With that, I pulled Sarah out of the office, not looking back. Ethan, what are you doing? Why didn't you fight them? The second we were outside, Sarah yanked her arm free. They stole our work. Are we just going to let it go? Fight? How? I looked at her calmly. It's useless. The judge, the jury, and the audience are all on their side. What chance do we have? If we make a scene now, we'll just look like two crazy people for them to laugh at. Then what do we do? All our hard work. Sarah's voice was filled with despair. Hard work. I laughed a cold, sharp sound. Who said they stole our hard work? I took out my phone and played a recording. The voices of Chad, Blake, and Isabella, along with our own, filled the air, perfectly clear. Is that? Sarah stared at the phone. It's evidence, I said, putting it away, a dangerous glint in my eye. They want to play dirty? Fine. We'll play. Ethan, what are you going to do? Sarah looked at me, a little scared. I met her gaze, a slow, predatory smile forming on my lips. All they stole was an empty shell. The core of this project is the app, and the source code for that app only exists in one place, my head. They think they've won? Ha! The show is just getting started. Sarah, trust me, in less than 3 days, they're going to be begging us for help. After being disqualified, Sarah and I went quiet, acting as if we'd accepted our fate. I still went to the library every day, but instead of coding, I just browsed random books. Sarah went back to her old routine, class, cafeteria, dorm, but she never went near the basketball court again, and she stopped paying attention to any news about Blake. But behind the scenes, our real plan was in motion. I made a few special modifications to the Campus Connect app. Then, using an anonymous account, I uploaded it to the university's online forum with a simple description. Campus Connect Beta version 1.0, free download. Built for the lazy student in all of us. Lecture sitters, delivery grabs, meal runners. If you can think it, we can do it. The post immediately caused a stir. College students are, by nature, a lazy demographic. An app that let you pay a few bucks to solve your minor inconveniences was tailor-made for them. Soon, the first brave user downloaded the app and posted a task, seeking a hero to grab me a boba from the shop by the campus gate. Reward, $5. The task was accepted almost instantly. 10 minutes later, the original poster replied to the thread in all caps. Holy crap, it actually works. Boba is secured. This app is amazing. With the first success story, a flood of students started downloading and using the app. In a single day, Campus Connect was downloaded over 1,000 times. The forums were buzzing with talk about it. And through all this, Blake and Isabella were completely oblivious. They were still basking in the glory of stealing our idea, busy revising their proposal for the upcoming preliminary round of the competition, convinced they were about to be campus celebrities. They thought an app was just a concept on paper. They had no idea that the real core was the technology and the execution. The day of the preliminary round arrived quickly. The competition was held in a large lecture hall. The judges were a few deans and some entrepreneurs from outside the university. Blake and Isabella, as the star project personally recommended by the student body president, were scheduled to present first. Blake was in a sharp suit, his hair slicked back. Isabella wore an elegant white pantsuit. Standing together, they really did look like the perfect power couple. Good afternoon, honored judges, faculty, and fellow students. Blake began, his voice radiating confidence. Today, we are here to present a project that will completely revolutionize campus life. Our innovative app, Campus Connect. He launched into a grand speech about the project's vision, market potential, and revenue model. All of it lifted, almost word for word, from our proposal. The judges listened, nodding along with appreciative smiles. Our goal is to achieve full user coverage on campus within 1 month and reach 1,000 daily active users. Blake concluded with a flourish. Just then, one of the judges, a sharp-looking entrepreneur, pushed up his glasses and spoke. Mr. Harding, your concept is very promising. However, an app isn't just an idea. Do you have a working prototype? Can we see the app itself? The question made Blake and Isabella flinch. Well, our app is currently still in the development phase. Blake stammered. Oh, is that so? The entrepreneur smiled, pulling out his own phone. Because I happen to have heard that an app called Campus Connect has already launched a beta test on our campus. And as of yesterday, its daily active users exceeded 2,000. As he spoke, he connected his phone to the projector. Displayed on the massive screen behind the stage was the interface of our app. A dense list of active tasks was refreshing in real time. The entire hall erupted. Everyone stared in disbelief, their eyes darting between the screen and the blood-drained faces of Blake and Isabella on stage. That's impossible. Isabella cried out. Yes, how is that possible? A voice called out calmly from the back of the hall. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway were me and Sarah. I had a faint smile on my face. Sarah stood tall beside me, her eyes filled with triumph. Mr. Harding, Miss Vance, I said, walking slowly down the aisle toward the stage. Didn't you say this was your project? How is it that you didn't even know your own app had launched? Our appearance sent Blake and Isabella into a full-blown panic. This is your doing, Blake yelled, pointing a trembling finger at me. My doing? What did I do? I held up my hands in a gesture of innocence. I just released my own product for people to use. You two, on the other hand, are standing up there waving around my business plan. How's that feel? You're lying. The project is ours. Isabella insisted weakly. Is it? I smiled. I walked up to the podium, pulled a USB drive from my pocket, and plugged it into the laptop. Honor judges, since Miss Vance claims the project is hers, I'm sure she can explain to us how the back-end source code was written. As I spoke, I opened a programming interface. The screen instantly filled with dense, incomprehensible lines of code. For example, this section right here, the core algorithm for task distribution and user matching. Miss Vance, perhaps you could walk everyone through the logic you used when you wrote this. I held a microphone out to her. She stared at the screen full of code, her face turning a deep shade of crimson. She couldn't utter a single word. She didn't just not understand it. She couldn't even read it. I turned to Blake. Or maybe Mr. Harding would like to explain? After all, you're the genius who can write 10 of these proposals in his sleep. Blake's face was even uglier than Isabella's. He glared at me with enough hatred to burn a hole through me. By now, everyone in the hall understood. The truth was painfully obvious. That's enough. The entrepreneur judge slammed his hand on the table and stood up. He stared at Blake and Isabella with pure fury. Academic plagiarism and public fraud. You two are a disgrace to Blackwood University. I move to disqualify this entry immediately, and I strongly recommend that the university investigate and discipline this appalling behavior. His words were a death sentence. I picked up the microphone and gave the audience a victorious smile. My apologies for the interruption, everyone. Now, if you don't mind, may we have the actual creators present our project, Campus Connect? I handed the microphone to Sarah. She took a deep breath and stepped into the spotlight. Bathed in its light, she was no longer the timid, insecure girl from the bleachers. She radiated a confidence that was dazzling. From the corner of my eye, I saw Isabella staring up at her, her face contorted with a jealousy so intense it was terrifying. The outcome of the preliminary round was no surprise. Our project received a unanimous top score. Blake and Isabella, on the other hand, became the campus laughingstocks, their names forever tied to the plagiarism scandal. To save face, the university issued a campus-wide reprimand and stripped them of all academic honors and awards. For a normal student, it wouldn't be a big deal. But for golden children like them, who had lived their entire lives in the spotlight, it was the ultimate humiliation. It was dark by the time we left the lecture hall. We won. Sarah was still in a daze, walking beside me as if in a dream. Yeah, we won. I smiled. How does it feel? It feels. She looked up at me, her eyes sparkling under the campus lights, like I finally got to breathe after being underwater for years. It feels amazing. She broke into a laugh, a carefree, happy sound like a child's. It was the first time I'd ever seen her laugh like that. "Come on, to celebrate. Dinner's on me tonight," I announced grandly. "What are we having?" she asked. "Dining hall number 2. Chili. All you can eat." She burst out laughing again. This time, when we sat down with our trays, she didn't refuse my gesture. Instead, she took the brownie from her own tray and placed it on mine. "Like you said, you work 3 jobs? You need the energy," she teased, mimicking my earlier tone. Looking at her bright, smiling face, my heart did a little flip. I realized that this girl, who I'd thought of as a fellow nobody, a partner in crime, had somehow carved out a special place in my heart. After dinner, I walked her back to the women's dorm. "Ethan," she said, stopping at the entrance, her expression serious. "Today. Thank you." "There you go with the thank yous again." I shook my head. "We're partners, aren't we?" "No," she said, looking down, her eyes avoiding mine. "Today, on the stage, when you handed me the microphone, I felt like maybe I wasn't so useless after all." "You were never useless," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "Sarah, you're brilliant. Your writing, your mind, your resilience. Those are things most people don't have. You were just aiming them at the wrong target." My words made her blush. "Don't ever sell yourself short again," I said, ruffling her hair in a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. "You deserve better." She stiffened for a second, but didn't pull away. "So, what about you?" she asked quietly, her head still down. "What are your plans for the future?" "Me?" I smiled. "My plan is to make Campus Connect a success and win that prize money. Then use that money to make more money. And then, I looked at her, my voice softening with a tenderness that surprised even me. "Then I take my partner, and we get the hell out of this place. Go to a city where nobody knows us, buy a small house, start a normal company, and live a quiet life." She looked up, stunned, her eyes shining. "Your partner? Does that include me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Of course," I said without hesitation. She smiled, a smile brighter than the moon. "Okay," she nodded firmly. "Then it's a promise. It's a promise." I watched her run into the dorm, a smile lingering on my face long after she was gone. But I didn't leave. I turned and walked into the small patch of woods across from the dorm, found a dark spot, and leaned against a tree. I lit a cigarette. I didn't smoke, but the original Ethan did whenever he was stressed. As the smoke curled around me, my expression grew cold and sharp. I hadn't left because I knew someone was waiting for me. Sure enough, a tall figure emerged from the shadows of the building and strode toward me. It was Blake. He'd changed out of his suit into casual clothes, but his handsome face was dark with fury. "Cross," he said, his voice so cold it felt like ice. I didn't answer, just gave him a lazy glance, and took another drag from the cigarette. My dismissal enraged him. "You think you're hot shit now, don't you?" He grabbed the front of my shirt and slammed me against the tree, his eyes burning with violence. "You're a cockroach. You think you can play games with me? I have 100 ways to make sure you don't survive another semester at Blackwood." I wasn't scared. I slowly blew a smoke ring right in his face. He coughed, his fury intensifying. "Mr. Harding," I said, flicking ash from the cigarette, my voice laced with scorn. "Is this all you've got? Pathetic threats? What happened to all that alpha male pride? You get knocked down once, and you completely lose your cool. You're dead," he roared, raising his fist. But the punch never landed. Another figure had appeared. "Isabella." "Blake, stop!" she cried, running over and grabbing his arm. "Stay out of this," he snarled, shaking her off. "Are you crazy? This is campus. You want to get suspended for assault?" she pleaded. Her words seemed to bring him back to his senses. He lowered his fist, but the murderous look in his eyes didn't fade. "Cross, you just wait," Blake said, pointing a finger at my face. "I won't forget today. I will make you pay 1,000 times over for what you've done." He turned and stormed off into the darkness. Isabella didn't follow him immediately. She just stood there, looking at me with an incredibly complex expression. "Ethan," she said, her voice tight with resentment. "Why are you doing this? You know I can't stand that girl, Sarah. Are you hanging out with her just to make me angry?" Her completely self-absorbed take was so ridiculous, I almost laughed out loud. "Miss Vance," I said, dropping the cigarette and crushing it under my shoe. "Let me say this one last time. I have my own plans for my life. You are not in them. As for you and Blake, I continued, a mocking smile on my face. Your little psychodrama is your own business. But if you insist on dragging me and Sarah into it. I took a step closer, leaning in so only she could hear me. I will show you that even a horse will kick when it's cornered. And I promise you it will hurt. Without another glance at her shocked face, I turned and vanished into the night. After the plagiarism scandal, Blake and Isabella laid low for a while. Their reputations on campus were in tatters, and they knew any further moves would only attract more negative attention. But that didn't mean they'd given up. People with their level of arrogance don't just walk away. The calm before the storm is always the most dangerous. Sarah and I didn't let our guard down for a second. We prepared for the Innovators Challenge finals while quietly using Campus Connect to build our war chest. Within 2 weeks of its official launch, the app had over 5,000 registered users, with daily transaction volumes stabilizing around $3,000. We took a 5% commission, which meant we were clearing about $150 a day. To Blake and Isabella, that was probably pocket change. But to us, it was the capital for our counterattack, the foundation of our dignity. Sarah was like a new person. She channeled all the obsessive energy she once had for Blake in her work. She managed the app's online presence and user feedback, working tirelessly but always with a smile of fulfillment on her face. She even used the first bit of money she earned to buy me a new shirt. "Your old white one is turning yellow," she'd said, her face bright red as she handed it to me, unable to meet my eyes. Holding the new shirt, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. It felt good to be cared for, but the peace didn't last. One day, I was in my dorm optimizing code when Leo, my heavy-set roommate, burst in, flustered. "Ethan, bad news. Big trouble." "What is it?" I frowned. "Just check the campus forum." My stomach dropped. I immediately pulled up the forum. Pinned to the top was a thread in bold red letters. "Massive scandal. Campus Connect founder Ethan Cross is the mastermind behind an illegal loan sharking ring." My pupils contracted. I clicked the link. The post was written in a dramatic, inflammatory style, exposing the dark truth behind me and Campus Connect. It claimed our app wasn't a service platform at all, but a front for predatory campus loans. The post laid out a logical argument. We used low commission fees to lure users in, collected their personal data, and then sold that information to illegal loan companies. To make it more believable, the poster included evidence. One picture was a screenshot of the Campus Connect user database, showing names, student IDs, and phone numbers. Another was a doctor chat log between me and some loan company manager, where I was discussing how to use violent collection methods on students who were late with payments. The post ended with a dramatic plea. "Fellow students, open your eyes. Don't be fooled by this scum, Ethan Cross, who will do anything for money. Boycott predatory loans. Start by boycotting Campus Connect." The post was a bombshell. WTF? Is this for real? Ethan is that ruthless? No wonder he came up with an app like this. It was all to set up a loan scheme. This is disgusting. He should be expelled. Deleting the app right now. Shit, has my info already been sold? The forum exploded with outrage. Students who had no idea what was really going on began to attack me viciously. The user data on our back and took a nosedive as thousands of people started deleting their accounts. "Ethan, what do we do?" Sarah's panicked voice came through the phone. "Stay calm." I told her, my own voice steady. "This is obviously Blake and Isabella's work. No one else would use such a vile tactic. And the fact that they got a screenshot of our user database meant they'd likely bought someone on the inside." My eyes drifted over to Leo, who was pretending to be engrossed in the forum drama. "So what if it's them?" Sarah's voice was filled with despair. "Everyone thinks we're loan sharks now. Our reputations are ruined. The project is finished." "Who says it's finished?" My voice was still calm, maybe even with a hint of amusement. "Ethan, are you laughing?" Sarah sounded like she was about to cry. "Of course I'm laughing," I said, looking at the malicious post on my screen, my smile widening. "Because I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time." "What opportunity?" she asked, confused. "An opportunity to take them down for good." A cold light flashed in my eyes. "Sarah, listen to me. Don't do anything. Don't post any replies. Let them stir the pot. The bigger the drama, the better. I want the school administration to get involved." "Why?" Because the biggest fish only bite when the water is murkiest. After hanging up, I didn't go on the forum to defend myself. I didn't even bother trying to trace the poster's IP address. I just quietly opened my code editor and started writing a new program. The loan shark scandal escalated, with Blake and Isabella fanning the flames from the shadows. The forum post quickly morphed into a campus-wide witch hunt. My photo, name, and major were plastered everywhere. Walking on campus, I could feel the stares of disgust and contempt. People would point at me, whispering scumbag. Sarah wasn't spared. As my partner, she was labeled an accomplice. People threw trash at her on the street. Hateful posters were plastered all over the entrance to her dorm, calling her a soulless whore who would do anything for money. Ethan, I don't know how much more I can take. Sarah's voice on the phone that night was choked with exhaustion and tears. I knew how agonizing it must be for a young woman to endure such a vicious public attack. Just hold on a little longer, I said softly. The darkest hour is just before the dawn. Trust me, the sun is about to rise. But why are they doing this to us? What did we do that was so wrong? She asked, her voice filled with a desperate confusion. We did nothing wrong. My voice turned to ice. They're the ones who are wrong. This whole world that only respects money and power is wrong. They want to destroy us, not because we're bad people, but because our very existence offends them. Our refusal to stay down challenges their authority. In their world, nobodies like us are meant to be stepped on. Any spark of rebellion must be ruthlessly extinguished. But they made a mistake, I said, my voice firm. They thought we were a spark they could snuff out. They don't realize we're weeds. You can burn the field, but we'll always grow back. After hanging up, I looked at the nearly finished program on my computer screen, a fire for vengeance burning in my eyes. I hadn't been idle. I had secretly used Leo's computer to trace the IP address of the original forum poster. Unsurprisingly, it led directly to Blake's dorm room. I also discovered a recent $5,000 deposit into Leo's bank account. The sender was the student body president, Chad Miller. It was exactly as I'd thought. A neat, dirty chain of command. Blake and Isabella paid Chad, who paid my roommate Leo. Leo used his access to my room to steal a screenshot of our database and delivered it to them. And now I was going to break every single link in that chain. The time was right. The next day, the Dean of Students' office finally launched an investigation. I was summoned to the office. The dean, a stern-looking middle-aged man, was there, along with my academic advisor. And, of course, Blake and Isabella, attending as representatives of the concerned student body. Mr. Cross, the dean said, pushing a printout of the forum post across the desk toward me. Do you have an explanation for this? Sir, everything in that post is a lie, I said calmly. A lie? Isabella immediately interjected. Dean, the evidence is right there, and he's still denying it. He used the app to collect our data for a loan sharking scheme. That's right. Blake chimed in. People like him need to be made an example of. He should be expelled. They were a well-rehearsed duo, acting as if my guilt was a foregone conclusion. The dean frowned and looked at me. Mr. Cross, if you claim these are lies, do you have any proof? Of course. I nodded, then turned to Blake and Isabella with a knowing smile. But before I present my evidence, I'd like to ask Mr. Harding and Miss Vance a question. What question? Blake asked, suddenly wary. I'd like to know how you were so certain I was running a loan sharking operation, I said. Isn't it obvious? The forum post spelled it all out. Isabella blurted out. Oh, so all of your accusations are based on that single, anonymous post. I pressed. Of course. Excellent. I nodded and pulled my laptop from my backpack. I connected it to the office projector and opened a program. Dean, professors, this is the administrative backend for the Campus Connect app. The app's database interface appeared on the screen. Just as the post claimed, our system does record usernames, student IDs, and contact information. This is necessary for the app to function. However, I said, my tone shifting as I typed a few commands. The interface changed, showing lines of scrolling code. While I designed this app, I was very concerned about user privacy. Therefore, I implemented a special form of double encryption on all core user data. I wrote the encryption algorithm myself. Without a unique decryption key that only I possess, anyone who accesses our servers, even if they hack them, will only see scrambled, meaningless text. I demonstrated on the spot. I clicked on a user's profile. Without the key, the field for their phone number and student ID showed only a long string of random characters. And yet, the screenshot that the poster uploaded shows all of this personal information in plain text. I pulled up their screenshot and placed it side by side with my live demonstration. "This raises a question," I said, turning to Blake and Isabella, a cold smile playing on my lips. "Since only I have the decryption key, where did the poster get their unencrypted screenshot? Unless..." I paused for dramatic effect. That screenshot was a complete fabrication. And the person who fabricated it is the same person who posted it to slander me. My words were a bombshell. The color drained from Blake and Isabella's faces. They had never dreamed I would have set a trap like this. They thought stealing the data was their checkmate, not knowing they had walked right into the snare I'd laid for them. "Fabricated? What proof do you have?" Blake blustered, but his voice was shaking. "This proof." I was done playing games. I opened another file on my laptop. It was a video. The footage was from my dorm room, filmed from a hidden spot on the bookshelf across from my desk. In the video, I'm seen coding at my computer. Then, I get up to get a drink of water. The moment I'm gone, my roommate Leo sneaks over to my desk, pulls out his phone, and starts frantically taking pictures of my screen. And the screen he was photographing was the very same unencrypted database interface from the forum post. An interface I had deliberately created as bait. What is this?" The dean's face had turned to stone as he watched the video. "That is my roommate, Leo, secretly photographing my computer," I explained calmly. "And the data he's photographing is from a honeypot program I built specifically because I anticipated someone would try to steal our data. All the information on that screen is fake, randomly generated by the program." I just didn't expect the fish to bite so quickly. As I spoke, I presented my final piece of evidence, Leo's bank statement, showing the $5,000 transfer from Chad Miller. "Dean, I'm confident that if you investigate Leo's finances and then follow the money to our student body president, Mr. Miller, it will become very clear who orchestrated this entire smear campaign, who fabricated the evidence, and who the real mastermind is." My case was airtight. My evidence was irrefutable. The dean's gaze, sharp as a knife, landed on the pale, trembling figures of Blake and Isabella. He was no fool. He knew exactly what had happened. The student body president, conspiring with two prominent students, bribing a roommate to steal data and fabricate evidence for a malicious smear campaign. This was no longer a simple student squabble. This was a full-blown, disgusting scandal. "You too," the dean roared, slamming his hand on the desk, his body shaking with rage. "Do you have anything to say for yourselves?" Blake and Isabella were finished. Every lie, every escape route had been cut off. It wasn't us. It was him. He set us up. Isabella shrieked hysterically. "Set you up?" I laughed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Miss Vance, I was simply protecting myself. You're the ones who went to such great lengths to try and destroy me. How is that me setting you up?" "You." "Enough," the dean bellowed, cutting her off. He snatched the phone from his desk and dialed campus security. "Hello, security? This is Dean Miller. I need you to send 2 officers to my office to escort Blake Harding from the finance program and Isabella Vance from the language department. Also, I need you to find and detain Chad Miller from the business school and Leo Garcia from computer science. Yes, they are implicated in an extremely serious case of malicious slander and fabrication of evidence. I want a full investigation." After he hung up, the office fell silent. Blake and Isabella looked like they were attending their own funerals. Soon, 2 uniformed security officers arrived and flanked them. "Let go of me. Do you have any idea who my father is?" "He's the chairman of Harding Corp." Blake blustered. "My dad is Arthur Vance. You so much as touch me, and you'll regret it." Isabella shrieked, playing her last card. But in the face of university regulations and ironclad evidence, their family names were worthless. The officers ignored their threats and dragged them out of the office like sacks of garbage. As they were being hauled away, they both shot me looks of pure, venomous hatred. Their eyes promised a war that was far from over. I met their gazes without flinching, a victor smile on my face. The office was finally quiet. The dean looked at me, his expression a mixture of approval, astonishment, and a hint of fear. He had clearly realized that the seemingly ordinary scholarship student before him possessed a mind and a ruthlessness far beyond his years. "Mr. Cross," he said after a long pause, "the university will see that you get justice. We will also compensate you and Miss Jenkins for the damages you have suffered. As for your Campus Connect project, the university has decided to award it the grand prize for the Innovators Challenge. The prize money will be increased to $50,000. From $30,000 to $50,000. It was a bribe, a request for my silence to protect the university's reputation." I understood completely. "Thank you, Dean," I said, standing and giving a respectful bow. "I trust the university will handle this matter justly." Walking out of the administration building, the sun was shining. I took a deep breath. The air had never tasted so sweet. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to Sarah. "The sun's up." Her reply came back instantly. "I know," followed by a teary-eyed emoji. We had won another battle, but I knew the war wasn't over. Pushed into a corner, people like Blake and Isabella would only become more desperate, more dangerous. The next attack wouldn't be petty campus schemes. It would be the real thing, a top-down assault from the world of money and power. But so what? I, Ethan Cross, have never been afraid of a challenge. Let them come. I was ready to see what else these golden children had in them. Blake, Isabella, Chad, and Leo all faced severe disciplinary action from the university. Chad was impeached as student body president. Leo received a formal demerit on his record, and while Blake and Isabella's parents managed to pull enough strings to prevent their expulsion, they were both placed on academic probation, their golden reputation shattered for good. Our app, Campus Connect, became legendary overnight. With the university's now official endorsement, it became the hottest app on campus. Sarah and I went from being social pariahs to celebrated entrepreneurs. The $50,000 prize money was wired to our account. We're rich. Sarah cried, tears of joy streaming down her face as she stared at the bank balance on her phone. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. "This is just the beginning," I said, stroking her hair, but I didn't feel the same elation. I knew the real test was about to begin. As expected, the retaliation from the Harding and Vance families was swift. The Vances struck first. Isabella's father, the richest man in the city, Arthur Vance, publicly denounced our project at a major business conference. Some of these young people today are far too eager for a quick buck. They create so-called innovations that, in reality, operate in legal gray areas, promoting laziness and even providing a platform for illicit activities. These business models are unhealthy, add no social value, and are doomed to fail. He didn't mention us by name, but everyone knew who he was talking about. A word from a man like him carried immense weight. The tide of public opinion began to turn against us again. Investors who had been sniffing around suddenly went cold. If the Vance family's attack was on public perception, the Harding family's was far more direct and deadly. Blake's father, Robert Harding, chairman of Harding Corp., brought the full force of his capital to bear. He hired a top-tier tech firm and poured millions into creating an exact clone of our app, which he called Campus Go. Campus Go didn't just copy our features. It launched with an insane subsidy campaign. Every transaction was 100% subsidized by the platform. That meant that on Campus Go, getting someone to sit in your lecture or grab your food was completely free. On top of that, they leveraged Harding Corp's vast network to launch a massive marketing blitz on 100 university campuses simultaneously. It was a brutal, soulless cash burn strategy. They were going to use their overwhelming financial advantage to bleed us dry. The day Campus Go launched, our daily active users plummeted by 80%. Students weren't stupid. Why pay for something when you could get it for free? "Ethan, what are we going to do?" Sarah's face was pale as she stared at our analytics. This is insane. They're just throwing money at us until we die." We had $50,000 in the bank. The Hardings were spending millions just to crush us. This wasn't a fair fight. This was an ant trying to fight an elephant. Are we going to lose?" Sarah's voice trembled with despair. The hope we had just found, the confidence she had just built, felt so fragile in the face of such raw, overwhelming power. I didn't answer. I just stared at the flashy marketing for Campus Go on my screen, my mind racing. A head-on fight was suicide. We couldn't outspend them. We had to find a weakness. A fatal flaw. Where was it? Harding Corp was a giant, seemingly invincible. But the larger the empire, the more complex its internal politics. Where there were tangled interests, there were hidden conflicts. Suddenly, I remembered a minor subplot from the original novel. Late in the story, Harding Corp had faced a major internal crisis. Blake's uncle, Jonathan Harding, had teamed up with several old guard executives to try and oust his brother, Robert, from the chairman's seat. The coup had ultimately failed, thanks to Blake's protagonist powers, but the infighting had left the company deeply wounded. And now, Robert Harding was wasting tens of millions of company dollars on a vanity project just to get revenge for his son. That kind of irresponsible spending had to be ruffling some feathers within the company, especially the feathers of a certain ambitious younger brother. A daring plan began to take shape in my mind. You want to play the capitalism game? Fine. I'll just set your own house on fire. Sarah, I said, turning to her. Yeah. Do you remember that economics professor we interviewed for our market research? Professor Albright. I remember. He really liked our project, gave us a lot of good advice, she said, confused as to why I was bringing him up. And if I remember correctly, he's one of the independent directors on the Harding Corp board, I said, a sharp glint in my eye. He is. Why? I think it's time we paid the good professor a visit. I smiled, a wolfish grin spreading across my face. And show him something I think he'll find very interesting. Professor Albright was a distinguished retired professor and a man of great integrity on campus. As an independent director for Harding Corp, his job was to oversee the company's finances and major decisions. In the novel, he was portrayed as a stern, by-the-book character who couldn't stand corporate malfeasance. During the power struggle between the Harding brothers, he had been firmly on Jonathan's side. The next day, Sarah and I went to his house with a box of expensive tea. You're here about the Campus Go situation, I presume, the professor said before we could even speak. Yes and no, I replied respectfully, placing the tea on his coffee table. Oh, he looked intrigued, motioning for us to sit. Professor, we didn't come here to complain or to ask for your help, I said, getting straight to the point. We came here to give you a gift. A gift? He chuckled. What use does an old man like me have for gifts? Instead of answering, I pulled a file from my bag and handed it to him. It wasn't our business plan. It was a document I had spent 2 sleepless nights compiling. An analysis of the Campus Go project's return on investment and latent financial risks. The professor took it, looking puzzled. He put on his reading glasses and began to read. His expression shifted from casual curiosity to deep concentration, and finally, to outright shock. In the report, I had used professional-grade financial models to dissect the Campus Go project. I detailed how Harding Corp had burned through over $30 million in marketing and subsidies in less than a month. I argued that because the model had no way of generating its own revenue, the users would vanish the second the subsidy stopped. The $30 million was, for all intents and purposes, being set on fire. More importantly, using a few creative technical methods, I had acquired a portion of Campus Go's real back-end data. The data showed that the vast majority of their users were just deal hunters attracted by the freebies. Over 70% of them never logged in again after completing a single free task. User retention was practically zero. My conclusion was devastating. The Campus Go project is a valueless vanity project, existing solely to suppress a competitor. It will not only result in massive financial losses for Harding Corp, but will also severely damage the company's reputation and stock value in the market. This decision to misuse company resources to settle the chairman's son's personal vendetta is a grave betrayal of fiduciary duty to all shareholders. Every word was a dagger aimed at Harding Corp's heart. This report, Professor Albright's hands were trembling slightly. Is this data accurate? Every bit of it, I nodded. You can have your own people verify it. The professor fell silent, his expression unreadable. He clearly hadn't expected a student to produce such a professional and incisive piece of business analysis. What do you want me to do? He asked, his voice low. I don't want you to do anything. I smiled innocently. I just felt that, as an independent director of Harding Corp, you have a right to know the truth. Who you choose to share this report with? Well, that's entirely up to you. The implication was clear, and Professor Albright was a very smart man. Who would be most interested in this report? Robert Harding's bitter rival, Jonathan. This report wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the perfect weapon for an attack at the next board meeting. I understand, the professor said, taking a deep breath and carefully placing the report aside. He looked at me with a sense of awe. Ethan, you are a terrifyingly brilliant young man. You're too kind, Professor, I said with a humble smile. We're just trying to survive. Leaving the professor's house, Sarah was still trying to process what had just happened. Ethan, what on earth did you show him? A gift for the Harding family, I said with a mysterious grin. A gift that's going to make their own house burn down around them. It's called Fighting Fire with Fire. 3 days later, Harding Corp convened an emergency board meeting. As I had predicted, Jonathan Harding used my report to launch a full-scale assault on his brother. Robert, I told you that son of yours was a lost cause, and now you're wasting tens of millions of company funds to clean up his messes? What do you take us for? Your personal ATM? I demand an immediate halt to all funding for the Campus Go project, and I propose a formal review of the chairman's leadership and decision-making capabilities. Jonathan's attack was supported by Professor Albright and several other directors. Robert Harding was cornered and humiliated. Though he managed to use his authority as chairman to quash the immediate threat, he was forced to cut all funding to Campus Go. The incident shattered the fragile peace between the two brothers, igniting an all-out war for control of the company. Campus Go, the golden child app that was supposed to crush us, died less than a month after its launch. And our app, Campus Connect, after a brief and brutal winter, found its spring. Our users came flooding back. Not only had we survived, but the story of our David and Goliath battle had made us famous. We were seen as heroes who had stood up to a corporate bully. We won again, Sarah said, staring at the business news on her phone about the turmoil at Harding Corp, her voice filled with disbelief. Yeah, I leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath. We won again. This victory was even sweeter. We had used our minds, a clean and strategic countermove, to defeat a multi-million-dollar corporate assault. I looked at the girl beside me, her face flushed with excitement, and my heart swelled with a profound tenderness. On impulse, I reached out and pulled her into a hug. She stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, melting against my shoulder. Sarah, when we graduate, let's get married. Her whole body went rigid. Then she buried her face in my chest, and like a little kitten, gave a small, firm nod. In that moment, I felt like I had the whole world. The infighting at the Harding Corporation escalated into a brutal civil war. Robert and Jonathan were so consumed with destroying each other that they no longer had the time or resources to bother with us. The Vance family, seeing that their allies were sinking, wisely chose to retreat and cease their public attacks. We finally had the breathing room we needed to grow. Campus Connect won the grand prize in the Innovators Challenge, as promised. The victory brought us not just fame, but also the attention of serious investors. Before graduation, we incorporated as our own company, Trailblazer Tech. Sarah and I both turned down lucrative job offers from major corporations to pour everything we had into our own venture. We rented a tiny office near campus. It was less than 300 square feet, but it was ours. We hired a few bright, ambitious underclassmen to join us. The company was small, but it buzzed with energy and passion. Through it all, my relationship with Sarah grew deeper. We were partners in every sense of the word. We spent our days building our dream and our nights planning a future together. A simple life, a small wedding, a house in a quiet city after graduation. Everything was finally going right. But I had underestimated the depths of Blake and Isabella's madness. After 2 humiliating public defeats, their social lives were in ruins. Blake was no longer the campus king. He was a pariah. Isabella was no longer the untouchable queen. Her so-called friends had all abandoned her. The fall from grace had twisted them, corroding their minds with a dark, obsessive hatred. They blamed us for everything. In their warped view, we had destroyed their perfect lives. They were like 2 venomous snakes, coiled in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came sooner than I expected. To celebrate getting our first round of seed funding, our team planned a weekend retreat at a resort in the nearby countryside. We had no idea we were walking into a trap. The resort was owned by the Vance family. The only reason we chose it was because of a strong recommendation from one of our first employees, an underclassman named Kevin. He was a hardworking kid from a poor background, and we trusted him completely. We never imagined he would betray us. Isabella had offered him a sum of money we could never hope to match. That night, during our team dinner, Kevin was unusually attentive, constantly refilling our glasses, encouraging everyone to drink up. I felt a prickle of unease, but the mood was so celebratory, I let it slide. I could hold my liquor, but Sarah and a few of the others were visibly tipsy. After dinner, Kevin suggested we go to the hot springs on the hill behind the resort. The path there led across a narrow rope bridge. As Sarah and I reached the middle of the bridge, there was a loud snap. One of the main support ropes gave way. The bridge instantly pitched sideways. Sarah screamed as she lost her footing and plunged over the side. Pure adrenaline took over. I lunged and caught her hand just in time. Half my body was hanging off the bridge, every muscle straining to hold on to her. Below us was a 40-foot drop onto a rocky, churning river. A fall meant certain death. "Ethan!" Sarah's face was white with terror as she clung to my hand. "Don't let go. I've got you." I gritted my teeth, the veins in my arms bulging. Our other employees, including Kevin, were frozen in shock at the end of the bridge. And then, two figures emerged from the woods on the far side. Blake and Isabella. Their faces were alight with a sick, triumphant glee. Well, Ethan, how does it feel?" Blake sneered, crossing his arms as if watching a movie. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Let's see you think your way out of this." "It was you. You did this." I stared at them, pure rage boiling in my blood. "So what if it was?" Isabella's laugh was high and unhinged. "You stole my spotlight, Ethan. You ruined my life. And this bitch," she spat, glaring at Sarah, "dared to think she could take my man. You both deserve to die. Tonight, you could be Romeo and Juliet, for real." She pulled a fire axe from behind a tree and advanced on the bridge's remaining support rope. "No!" Sarah shrieked in despair. I stared at their insane faces, my mind racing faster than it ever had before. I couldn't die. I wouldn't let Sarah die. We had fought too hard, come too far. I would not let our story end at the hands of these two psychopaths. "Blake!" I roared. My voice made Isabella pause, the axe halfway through its swing. Blake frowned at me. "Any last words?" "Last words," I scoffed, though my arm felt like it was being torn from my socket. "You really think killing me solves your problems?" "What are you talking about? Your father and your uncle are at each other's throats, right?" I gasped, forcing the words out. "Did you know your dear Uncle Jonathan has been looking for a way to get rid of you, the sole heir, for years?" Blake's expression faltered. "If I die here tonight, who do you think will be the first person to pin the whole thing on you?" I pressed. "It'll be your uncle. He'll tell the world you hired hitmen to eliminate a business rival. You won't just lose the company. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. You think your plan is perfect? Look at the idiot you paid off." I glanced at the terrified Kevin. "He's your weak link. The second the cops question him, he'll crack. With a witness and a motive, you'll be finished." My words were a bucket of ice water over Blake's head. He wasn't stupid. He wanted revenge, but he didn't want to go to prison for it. "Blake, don't listen to him. He's stalling." Isabella screamed, her eyes wild with bloodlust as she raised the axe again. "Stop!" Blake shouted, his voice cracking with authority. He looked at me, his mind clearly racing. This was my chance. Using the last of my strength, I yelled at the still frozen Kevin. "Kevin, do you want to go to prison with him?" My voice snapped him out of his terror-induced paralysis. He looked from the gorge below to the insane faces of his employers, and a primal fear took over. "No, I don't want to go to jail. I don't," he whimpered. "Then help US. It's not too late. I'll forget this ever happened." I shouted, giving him an out. Survival instinct won. Kevin scrambled to his feet and launched himself, not at us, but at Blake and Isabella. "You're crazy. You tricked me," he screamed, tackling Blake. Caught off guard, Blake stumbled back, and the two of them went down in a clumsy heap. Isabella was frozen in shock by the sudden betrayal. "Now," I roared at Sarah, "hold on tight." Then I let go of the railing. For a terrifying second, we were in freefall, but I used our momentum, twisting my body and heaving with all my core strength, flipping her from below me onto my back. In the same motion, my other hand shot out and clamped onto one of the thick steel cables running underneath the bridge. Ah! Sarah screamed, wrapping her arms and legs around me like an octopus. The maneuver shredded the skin on my hands and arms, but it worked. We were dangling from the underside of the bridge, alive. "Ethan, are you okay?" Sarah sobbed into my ear. "Not dead yet," I grunted through clenched teeth. On the bridge, Blake had thrown Kevin off and was scrambling to his feet. Seeing us still alive, he grabbed the fallen axe, his face a mask of pure hate. "Go to hell!" he screamed, swinging the axe down my hand. At that exact moment, "Freeze! Police!" A dozen blindingly bright flashlights cut through the darkness. Uniformed officers swarmed the clearing from all sides. Blake and Isabella froze, their faces a perfect picture of disbelief. They had no idea how the police could possibly be here. I looked up at their dumbfounded faces and let out a weak, triumphant laugh. "You really think I'd walk into your territory without a backup plan?" Before we even left for the resort, I'd had a bad feeling. So I used Campus Connect to anonymously post one final, very special task. Urgent. A violent crime may occur tonight at 8 p.m. on the rope bridge behind the Pines Resort. Reward, $10,000. Task requirements. Alert the police and lead them to the scene at exactly 8:15 p.m. In this world, there are people who will sell their souls for money, and there are people who will sell their services to uphold justice. I had gambled on the latter, and I had won. The police swarmed the bridge, tackling Blake, Isabella, and the whimpering Kevin, slapping them all in handcuffs. A few minutes later, firefighters arrived and helped Sarah and me back onto solid ground. The second my feet touched the earth, my legs gave out, and I collapsed. Sarah fell with me, burying her face in my chest and finally letting out all her terror in a flood of tears. I held her tight, watching as Blake and Isabella were hauled away. Isabella was still screaming curses, but Blake, just before he was pushed into the police car, turned and looked at me one last time. The hatred was gone. The madness was gone. All that was left in his eyes was the quiet, hollow look of total defeat. He finally understood. We were never playing the same game. He, the golden child, had lost. Lost to the nobody he had always despised. I grinned back at him, my teeth stained red with blood. Blake Harding and Isabella Vance were convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 10 years in prison. The verdict was the talk of the city. Harding Corp., with its heir in jail and crippled by infighting, was eventually acquired by a rival, its empire crumbling to dust. The Vance family, disgraced by the scandal, faded from the public eye. The so-called chosen ones had finally, and spectacularly, fallen. After surviving that night, Sarah and I were unbreakable. Our company, Trailblazer Tech, flourished. We expanded the Campus Connect model to universities across the country, secured several rounds of funding, and watched our valuation soar. On graduation day, I didn't take Sarah to a fancy restaurant or buy her a diamond ring. I took her back to the basketball court where we first met. As the sun set, I got down on one knee, held out a small, commemorative pin from our company, and said, "Sarah Jenkins, marry me." She just laughed and cried and nodded her head. Our wedding was simple. No celebrities, no business tycoons. Just the small team of brothers and sisters who had fought alongside us from the very beginning. Seeing Sarah in her white dress, I felt like I was dreaming. A disposable villain from a trashy novel had actually rewritten his own fate and married the other villain. We didn't stay in Blackwood. The city held too many bad memories. We moved our company headquarters to a beautiful coastal city in the south. We bought a modest house with an ocean view. It wasn't a mansion, but it was a home. Sarah finally achieved her own dream. She stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the company and started her own venture capital fund, the Dream Forward Foundation, dedicated to supporting talented, ambitious young people who, like us, just needed a chance. She grew more confident and radiant with each passing year. And I continued to lead our company into the future. We were no longer nobodies. People called us Mr. Cross and Ms. Jenkins, but we never forgot where we came from. Sometimes, late at night, Sarah would curl up beside me and ask, "Ethan, do you ever regret it? Coming to this world?" I would kiss her forehead and smile. Never. If I hadn't come here, I never would have met you. It was true. This world had been absurd, cruel, and unfair. But it was also the place where I had found my love, my purpose, and my own self-worth. I was no longer a footnote in someone else's story. Epilogue. 10 years later. Paris, France. At a prestigious Fashion Week event, a brilliant designer from America receives a standing ovation for her stunning new collection. She was the first designer Sarah's Foundation ever sponsored, now a world-renowned name. In a backstage interview, she says through tears, "The person I have to thank most is Sarah Jenkins. She was the light that found me in my darkest moment." In a local prison, Blake Harding and Isabella Vance are released early for good behavior. But the world outside has moved on without them. They are no longer the children of privilege, just two people with a dark past. Someone claims they saw Blake washing dishes in the back of a greasy spoon diner. Someone else says Isabella married a man 20 years her senior, a balding divorcee with 3 kids. They had finally paid the price for their arrogance. On a beach, as the sun sets, Ethan and Sarah walk hand in hand, chasing the waves with their 5-year-old daughter. She has Sarah's eyes and a laugh that sounds like silver bells. "Daddy, Mommy, catch me," she shrieks with delight. Ethan and Sarah look at each other, their eyes reflecting the same deep, quiet happiness. They run, they laugh, and the setting sun stretches the shadows of their little family long across the sand. End.